Okay, so thank you, members. So following our consideration then, we are going to proceed through the clauses and put each of the questions formally in relation to the Adoption and Children Bill. If there is not consensus on the questions, I will ask members to vote through a show of hands, and the clerk will confirm the result of each vote. I advise members that where there are amendments to a clause, I will put the question on the amendment first. Where there are no amendments have been proposed to clauses and no issues have been highlighted, I would seek the agreement of the committee to group these particular clauses when putting the question. The question on any amendment that introduces a new clause to the bill will be put at the relevant point. So, moving to Part 1, Chapter 1, Introductory. Clause 1 is that considerations applying to the exercise of powers. There are no proposed amendment, members, so I just put the question, is the committee content with Clause 1 as drafted? Content, thank you. So the committee is content with Clause 1 as drafted. Moving on then to Chapter 2, the Adoption Service. Clause 2, Basic Definitions. There are no proposed amendments, members, so therefore can I ask, is the committee content with Clause 2 as drafted? Content, thank you. Members are content with Clause 2 as drafted. Clause 3 then is on adoption authority. Members advise you that the Department has provided an amendment to Clause 3 to remove the Regional Board from the definition of an adoption authority. This is a consequential amendment arising as a result of the Health and Social Care Act, NI 2022, dissolution of the Health and Social Care Board. So, is the committee content with the amendments to Clause 3 proposed by the Minister on page 285 of your pack, Amendments 1 and 2? Are members content? Yeah. So I put the question that the committee is content with Clause 3, subject to the proposed departmental amendments. And the committee is content that with Clause 3, subject to proposed departmental amendments. So moving on to Clause 4, the Adoption Service. There are no proposed amendments to this clause, members. So therefore, can I ask, is the committee content with Clause 4 as drafted? Yep, the committee has indicated they are content with Clause 4 as drafted. Clause 5, assessments, etc. for adoption support services. So members, the committee felt that Clause 5 as drafted did not make it sufficiently clear which categories of persons would be entitled to adoption support services and agreed to bring an amendment to clarify this. The text of the amendment is at page 265 of your pack. So, is the committee content with the amendment? Yep, thank you. Therefore, I put the question, is the committee content with Clause 5, subject to the amendment proposed by the committee? Content, thank you. Committee are content with Clause 5 as amended. So then, members, would like to seek your agreement to group Clauses 6 to 14. These cover registration and regulation of agencies and other provisions. So are members content that we group them together? Yep, thank you. So the committee is content with Clauses 6 to 14 as drafted. The committee, just to put in that formally, that members are content as drafted. So the committee are content with Clauses 6 to 14 as drafted. Moving on to Chapter 3, Placement for Adoption and Adoption Orders. So, members, the clauses in Chapter 3 provide for the replacement of freeing orders with new placement orders and introduce new provisions for the placement of children for adoption. So, I would like to seek members' agreement to group Clauses 15 to 64, which cover registration and regulation of agencies and other provisions. So, are members content, first of all, to group? Yeah, thank you. And then, is the committee content with Clauses 15 to 64 as drafted? Content, yes, thank you, members. Committee is content with Clauses 15 to 64 as drafted. Chapter 4, Status of Adopted Children. So again, I would like to seek the agreement of members to group Clauses 65 to 75, which cover the status of adopted children and how they are to be treated in law. Are members content that we group those? Thank you. And therefore I put the question to the committee, is the committee content with Clauses 65 to 75 as drafted? Yes, the committee are content. Thank you. Chapter 5 is to do with registers. Again, I would seek the agreement of members to group Clauses 76 to 81. These cover registration issues surrounding adoption and the duties placed on the Registrar General. So are members content that we group those? Content, thank you. And I would then put the question, is the committee content with Clauses 76 to 81 as drafted? Yep, the Committee is content with those clauses. Thank you. Chapter 6 then, adoptions with a foreign element. So can we agree, members, to group clauses 82 to 95, which cover registration issues surrounding adoption and the duties placed on the Registrar General? Tend to group those, members? Yeah. So therefore I put the question, is the committee content with clauses 82 to 95 as drafted? Committee are content with clauses 82 to 95 as drafted. Thank you. Chapter 7 then, miscellaneous. I would like to ask members' agreement to group clauses 96 to 101, which cover restrictions on making arrangements for adoption, payments made or received in consideration of an adoption, and associated offences. Are members content that we group these clauses? I then put the question, is the committee content with clauses 96 to 101 as drafted? Yep, members content, thank you. Members content with clauses 96 to 101 as drafted. Clause 102, pre-commencement adoptions information. Members, the Department has provided the text of 7 amendments to this clause, which aim to address issues with access to information identified by victims and survivors during the work of the Truth Recovery Design Panel. I refer members to the text of the amendments at pages 270 to 271 of your pack. So, is the committee content with the amendments to clause 102 proposed by the Minister? Yep, thank you. So the committee... Yes, go ahead, Karen.
Sorry, notwithstanding the points that I've made earlier, just to make sure it's all in line with Data Protection and Public Records Act, and just to express an interest as previous Minister in charge of public records.
Yes, so that's pending further information being provided to the committee that it's in keeping with other data protection legislation. Yep, members content on that basis, thank you. So I put the question in that the committee is content with clause 102, subject to the proposed departmental amendments and subject to further consultation in relation to ensuring these are compliant with other data protection legislation. Yep, thank you. Members, then we go to clauses 103 to 115, which I would seek members' agreement to group. These cover offences, proceedings for offences, children's court guardians, evidence, orders made in Great Britain and related issues, if any. So are members content that we group those? Yep, members are content, and I put the question then, is the committee content with clauses 103 to 115 as drafted? Content. Yep, content, thank you, members. Moving on to part 2, children order amendments. I would ask the members' agreement to group clauses 116 to 118, which cover the definition of family proceedings, the authority of foster parents, the duration of residence orders. Are members content we group? Yep. And is the committee content with clauses 116 to 118 as drafted? Yep, committee is content. Thank you, members. Clause 119, Special Guardianship Committee DOH amendments. So there are amendments here from both committee and department. Department has provided the text of 2 amendments to this clause. The purpose of this amendment is to place a duty on authorities on the face of the bill to conduct an assessment of needs for special guardian support services in respect of certain categories of people on request. I refer members to the text of the department's amendments at page 272. So, is the committee content with the amendments to clause 119 proposed by the Minister? Let me check now. Is the amendment from the committee additional to the departmental one, or instead?
Yeah,
it's additional.
No, it's additional.
So therefore, I'll put that question again. Is the committee content with the amendment to clause 119 proposed by the Minister? Yeah, thank you. Committee is content. And the committee then has proposed an amendment to make it sufficiently clear which categories of persons would be entitled to adoption support services, replicating the amendment to clause
5.
Clause 5. So, is the committee content with the amendment to clause 119 as proposed by the committee? Yep, thank you. So I therefore need to put the question that the committee is content with clause 119, subject to the proposed departmental and committee amendments. Members content, thank you. Okay. So seek the agreement then, if members, if you would, to group clauses 120 to 121, which require an authority to ascertain a child's wishes and to provide services to children in need, if any provide services to children in need. So members content that we group those two? I would put the question then, is the committee content with clauses 120 to 121 as drafted? Yeah, committee content, thank you. Moving on to clause 122, duty of authorities to promote education achievement and prevent disruption of education and training. So members, the committee felt that the use of the word promote was not sufficiently strong and agreed to bring an amendment to strengthen this by adding the words facilitate and support. In addition, the committee agreed that the focus of this clause should be wider than academic achievement alone and agreed a further amendment to that effect. I refer members to the text of the amendments at page 266, amendments C and D. So I now put the question, is the committee content with the amendments to clause 122? Yeah, thank you. And therefore that the committee is content with clause 122 subject to the amendments proposed by the committee. Are we content? Thank you. Thank you, members. So I'd like then permission to seek further clauses, and these are group clauses 123 to 128. These cover corporate parenting principles, the placement of looked after children with prospective adopters, accommodation for children, authority for foster parents, and the duty to ensure visits to and advice for children and arrangements for former relevant children. So I will put the question then, members, is the committee content with clauses 123 to 128 as drafted? Yeah, thank you. I seek members' agreement to group clauses 129 to 131, which cover local offers for care leavers, inquiries into representations, and the review of cases of looked after children. Are members content to group? Yeah. And therefore I put the question that is the committee content with clauses 129 to 131 as drafted? Content, thank you. Clause 132 is advocacy services, and I will advise members that the department has provided the text of an amendment to this clause. Clause 132 inserts a new provision into the Children Order to provide that an authority must make arrangements for the provision of assistance to those who make or intend to make representation under Articles 35D and 45 of the Children Order. The department advises the stakeholders suggested that clause 132 should be amended to more clearly reflect that advocacy services will be independent of trusts. I refer members to the text of the amendments at page 274. Is the committee content with the amendments to clause 132 as proposed by the Minister? Yep, thank you. And therefore that the committee, put the question that the committee is content with clause 132 subject to the proposed departmental amendments. Yep, thank you. Members are content with that. Okay, and clause 133 then, members, is in relation to definition of harm. So members, the department has provided the text of two amendments to this clause. I refer members to the text of the amendments at page 276. So in relation to clause 133 then, is the committee content with the amendments to clause 133 proposed by the Minister pending consultation with the Human Rights Commission? Yeah, members are content. Thank you. So the committee is content, so to put the question that the committee is content with clause 133 subject to the proposed departmental amendments and subject to pending consultation with the Human Rights Commission. Yeah, great, thank you. Okay, thank you. Moving on, the next set of clauses then, members, are 134 and 135, which I would seek members' permission to group. These cover care plans and parental contact with children in care of an authority. So is the committee content that we group them? And then can I put the question that is the committee content with clauses 134 to 135 as drafted? Yep, committee content, thank you. Committee consent then to further group the clauses of 136 to 142. These cover the renaming of the guardian ad litem, the interest of children in proceedings, provisions regarding privately fostered children, and privacy for children in proceedings. Is the committee content with clauses 137 to 142 as drafted? Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, that was meant to be 136 to 142.
Sorry,
slight error in the brief there.
Yeah, 136, yes. I had said 136 at the outset, but then in the final, is the committee content with clauses 136 to 142 as drafted? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Clerk. So clause 143 then is in relation to the annual report. So committee was not in favour of ending the requirement to produce an annual report on the Children Order. Committee remembered we had significant discussion around that issue. So therefore, can I put the question that the committee is not content with clause 143 as drafted? Yeah, the committee is not content with that clause as drafted. Therefore, I will put the question, is the committee content to table its opposition to clause 143 standing part of the bill? Yeah, the committee is content. Thank you. Thank you. Okay then, can I move then to clauses 143A to 143E, which we have discussed, and advise members that the department has provided the text of amendments that give effect to part 1 of recommendation 4 from the report of the Truth Recovery Design Panel in relation to the preservation of records. So I refer members to the text of the amendments, which are tabbed at page 292 to 296. So is the committee content with the amendments to insert new clauses to provide for the preservation of records as proposed by the Minister and subject to consultation to ensure this legislation is compliant with other data protection legislation? Are members content? Yeah.
Public records, Chair. On the 1923 public records.
Public records, yeah. Yeah, that had been discussed, is right. So therefore, I will put the question that the committee recommends to the Assembly that the proposed new clauses 143A to 143E be added to the bill, subject to consultation to ensure this is compliant with other data protection and public records legislation. Yeah, thank you. Clause 144, members, then, is on the Adoption and Children Act register. There are a number of amendments to the following clauses to remove reference to the Health and Social Care Board following dissolution of the board. I refer members to the text of the amendments at page 285, amendments 3 and 4. So, is the committee content with the amendments to clause 144 proposed by the Minister? Yeah, thank you. And therefore, I put the question that the committee is content with clause 144, subject to the proposed departmental amendments. Yeah, thank you. Clause 145, use of an organisation to establish the register. There are a number of amendments to the clause to remove reference to the Health and Social Care Board following dissolution. I refer members to the text of the amendments at pages 285 to 286, amendments 5 to 11. So, is the committee content with the amendments to clause 145 proposed by the Minister? Yeah. Therefore, can I put the question that the committee is content with clause 145, subject to the proposed departmental amendments? Thank you. Clause 146, use of an organisation as an agency for payments. There are a number of amendments to the clause to remove reference to the Health and Social Care Board following its dissolution. I refer members to the text of the amendments at page 286, and these ones are amendments 12 to 13. Is the committee content with the amendments to clause 146 proposed by the Minister? Yeah. And therefore, is the committee content with clause 146, subject to the proposed departmental amendments? Yep, thank you, members. Clause 147, supply of information for the register. And again, these are a number of amendments to remove the Health and Social Care Board. I refer you to the amendments at page 286 to 287, and these are amendments 14 to 17. Is the committee content with the amendments to clause 147 proposed by the Minister? Yeah. And I put the question formally that the committee is content with clause 147, subject to the proposed departmental amendments. Committee is content, thank you. Clause 148 then on disclosure of information. Again, that's impacted by reference to the Health and Social Care Board, and there has been an amendment to take that into account. I refer members to the text of the amendments at page 287, and these are amendments 18 to 21. Is the committee content with the amendments to clause 148 proposed by the Minister? Content. Therefore, does the committee agree it is content with clause 148, subject to the proposed departmental amendments? Committee is content. Clause 149, search and inspection of the register by prospective adopters, again is impacted by the Health and Social Care Board dissolution. Refer members to page 288, and it is amendment 22. Is the committee content with the amendments to clause 149 proposed by the Minister? Content. I therefore put the question that the committee is content with clause 149, subject to the proposed departmental amendments. Content. Thank you. Clause 150, search and inspection of the register by adoption agencies. Again, impacted by Health and Social Care Board dissolution. Refer members to the amendments at page 288, amendment 23. Is the committee content with the amendments to clause 150 proposed by the Minister? Content. Therefore, can I ask that the committee is content with clause 150, subject to the proposed departmental amendments? Committee is content, thank you. So members, I'm looking to seek your agreement then again to group further clauses 151 to 154, which cover supplementary matters connected to the bill. So are members content that we group those 151 to 154? Yeah, and therefore is the committee content with clauses 151 to 154 as drafted? Yes, thank you. Clause 155, members, moving on, is to do with regulations and orders. So members, the department has provided the text of amendment to this clause. Clause 42 of the bill provides a power for the department to prescribe in regulations the matters to be taken into account by an adoption agency in determining the suitability of any persons to adopt a child. The department advises that the amendment will include regulations made under clause 42 in the list of regulations which will be subject to affirmative resolution procedure instead of negative resolution as originally drafted. I refer members to the text of the amendment at page 279. So I would like to put the question to the committee: is the committee content with the amendments to clause 155 proposed by the Minister? Yep. Therefore, is the committee content with clause 155 subject to the proposed departmental amendments? Yep, content. Thank you. So I would like then to group clauses 156 to 157 with members' consent. Are you okay for that, members? Thank you. I will therefore put the question: is the committee content with clauses 156 to 157 as drafted? Yes, members content. Thank you. Members are content with clauses 156 to 157 as drafted. So members, new clause 157A, review. I remind members the committee agreed to bring forward an amendment to require the department to review the legislation and make a report to the Assembly on implementation of parts 1 and 2 of the bill as soon as practicable after the 3rd anniversary of the commencement. The committee also agreed that the department should report at least once every 5 years. I refer members to the text of the amendment at page 266, which is Amendment G. So I now put the question to the committee: is the committee content with the amendment to insert a new clause, review the legislation and report on implementation? Members content? Thank you. So I put the question formally that the committee recommends to the Assembly that the new clause 157A is added to the bill. Members agree? Yep, thank you. Members agreed with that. Clause 158, interpretation. I advise members that the department has provided the text of an amendment to clause 158. This is a consequential amendment arising as a result of the Health and Social Care Board dissolution. So I put the question: is the committee content with the amendment to clause 158 proposed by the Minister? Content, thank you. And then put the question that the committee is content with clause 158 subject to the proposed departmental amendment. Yep. Committee is content as amended. Clause 159, commencement. I advise members the department has provided the text of an amendment to clause 159 to provide that the new clauses 143A to 143E relating to the preservation of records will be commenced on royal assent, ensuring that they are commenced at the earliest opportunity. I refer members to the text of the amendment at page 296, Amendment 6. So I will put the question: is the committee content with the amendment to clause 159 proposed by the Minister and pending consultation in relation to ensure its compliance with public health and data legislation, public records and data protection legislation? Thank you. So I then put the question again that the committee is content with clause 159 subject to the proposed departmental amendment and pending further information to ensure that this is compliant with public records and data protection legislation. Thank you. Clause 160, members, then the short title: there are no proposed amendments. So I would put the question: is the committee content with clause 160 as drafted? Yep, members content, thank you. Moving on to the schedules. Schedule 1, registration of adoption. There are no proposed amendments. So I'll put the question: is the committee content with Schedule 1 as drafted? Content, thank you. The committee are content as drafted. Schedule 2, disclosure of birth records by Registrar General. I advise members that the department has provided the text of an amendment to Schedule 2 to remove the requirement for those people who were adopted before 18th of December 1987 to attend an interview with a counsellor before information on their birth records can be provided to them by the Registrar General. I refer members to the text of the amendment at page 280, and also, members, we have discussed that this will be noted in relation to how that support will be extended to people as part of our report. So I refer members to the text of the amendment at page 280, and I will put the question: Is the committee content with the amendment to Schedule 2 proposed by the Minister? Yep, committee content. And then I put the question formally, the committee is content with Schedule 2 subject to the proposed departmental amendment. Yep, content, thank you. Schedule 3 is minor and consequential amendments. Members, the Department has provided the text of an amendment to Schedule 3 relating to a consequential amendment to the Access to Justice NI Order 2003. The Department has also provided the text of a consequential amendment to Schedule 3 arising as a result of the Health and Social Care Act dissolution of the Regional Board. I refer members to the text of the amendments at page 282 and pages 288 to 289, amendments 25 to 28. So is the committee content with the amendments to Schedule 3 proposed by the Minister? Content, thank you. And I put the question that the committee is content with Schedule 3 subject to the proposed departmental amendments. Content? Yes, the committee is content, thank you. Schedule 4, transitional and transitory provisions and savings. And Schedule 5, which is repeals. So members, the Department has provided the text of an amendment to Schedules 4 and 5 to repeal the Adoption Hague Convention Act, NI 1969, and to insert savings provision to ensure that the future rights of anyone adopted through a convention adoption order under the 1969 Act will not be negatively affected by its repeal. The Department has also provided the text of consequential amendments to Schedule 4 and 5 arising as a result of the Health and Social Care Act, the dissolution of the Regional Board. I refer members to the text of the amendments at pages 283 to 284 and page 289, amendments 29 to 34. So we put the question, is the committee content with the amendment to Schedules 4 and 5 proposed by the Minister? Content, thank you. And therefore to put the question that the committee is content with Schedules 4 and 5 subject to the proposed departmental amendment. Yep, content, members are content, thank you. So the long title then, members, is the committee content with the long title as drafted? Yep, committee is content. So, members, that concludes clause by clause scrutiny of the Adoption and Children Bill. We will now consider the committee's draft report on the bill. And members, the committee will schedule a briefing from the examiner on statutory rules on further suggested amendments, and the committee reserve the right to consider further amendments and to include these in an addendum report should we bring those forward. So members, that concludes our consideration of the Adoption and Children Bill, and thank you for that. We will now move into closed session to continue our deliberation on the Safe Access Zones Bill. Thank you.